All right, let's move on with a look through the morning's French newspapers, hot off the press. Oliver Farry's with me. He's been taking a look. Hi there, Ollie.
Good morning.
We're going to start off with Greece dominating the headlines this morning. It's such a massive topic for people here in France and across Europe, isn't it?
Yeah, it pretty much concerns us all. The extraordinary summit of Eurozone members is taking place in Brussels later today. It's all over the French papers. It's been billed as the last chance saloon in the hope of finally reaching a deal on the conditions for Greece's next tranche of bailout funds. If an agreement is not reached before the end of the month, Greece risks defaulting on its credit repayments, of course, and ultimately bankruptcy and possibly leaving the Eurozone. The pro-business daily headline, L'Opinion, says Greece is playing double or quits. It quotes European Council President Donald Tusk as saying that now is not the time to play games that will have real consequences, above all for the Greek people. The right-leaning Le Figaro says it's not only Greece but Europe that's on a razor's edge. The possibility of a Grexit would risk plunging the Eurozone into an unprecedented and dangerous situation, even if inside the paper Alexia Kefalos reports that the Greeks refuse to think the worst will happen. After 5 years of austerity, the man on the street does not envisage Greece leaving the euro. One man interviewed says he thinks nothing will be decided at Monday's summit and that Alexis Tsipras will go all the way to the June 30th deadline to try and strike a deal. So there's a lot of brinksmanship going on here, I think.
I think there has been for several weeks, hasn't there?
Yeah.
But some optimism in what you've been pulling out the papers there. That's mainly coming from inside Greece, though.
Yeah, particularly in the French media, there's a little bit of sympathy for them, but not a huge amount. Tsipras' government is coming in for a lot of criticism for his perceived intransigence. L'Opinion reminds us of IMF chief Christine Lagarde's words, where she mentioned the necessity of restoring dialogue with adults in the room, which is a fairly cutting comment on Greece's stance. L'Opinion's front page editorial denounces Tsipras' government, which it says has exhausted its political credibility by showing its amateurism born of childishness. It has now, quote, ruined its chances of being listened to by systematically playing the card of political legitimacy against the Brussels technocrats, the vultures of the IMF, and the psychologically rigid European Central Bank. It doesn't seem to care too much for the Greek people's democratic decision, but it does say that they've shown their defiance of Syriza this past weekend by withdrawing their money from the banks. Le Figaro is similarly unsympathetic to Syriza. Its editorial urges Mr. Tsipras to wake up. The head of the Greek government, it says, is mystifying Europeans and persists in disowning his own promises. He has till now presented no credible reforms liable to assure the economic viability of his country. And it says, applying the unrealistic demagogic programme of his means demanding new largesse, which means other people are going to pick up the tab. He says, who could accept such blackmail?
I have to say, just to play devil's advocate, these people haven't lived through several years of austerity within Greece. And we've heard from Natalie Sfarakas just earlier this morning about new tax hikes and new measures that are likely to be coming in.
And patience is wearing thin as well in Greece, yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean, is there anyone in the French press who's willing to have a go and try and see things from the Greek point of view?
There are a few voices. Athens is not totally isolated. The Catholic daily Le Croix says Greece must not be let go. It says it reminds us of two things: that solidarity is at the heart of the European project and that other member states must answer to that. It also says that the EU has a responsibility during the crisis, not least because Greece's creditors were themselves negligent in supplying the country with cheap credit throughout the good years. The left-wing L'Humanité is very much on Greece's side, not much of a surprise there. It says Greece's partners, particularly France, should come to Athens' rescue. L'Humanité says Tsipras is right for refusing to inflict another bloodletting on his people to which they might ultimately succumb.
Very strong words, bloodletting.
Yeah, absolutely. Even the pro-business Les Echos, which is not wholly sympathetic to Syriza or Alexis Tsipras, does bemoan the lack of movement on either side. At no time in the past 5 years has a real dialogue been built between the two camps to try to understand why the recipe that worked in other countries in the Eurozone has failed in Greece. It concludes that a gaping chasm separates Greece and its creditors. So perhaps later on today there will actually be some middle ground found between the two. But as the man on the street in Greece says, it may actually go all the way to the June 30th wire.
And that's when they have to pay back that enormous sum of money to their creditors. I think people across Europe, whether they like Syriza or not, hoping that it's not going to come to a default. We'll find out a bit more with you a bit later on from the international papers as well. Thanks very much then for now. Oliver Farry looking through this morning's French newspapers for us.